The boy gripping Winona's hand stared at Cole with his own gray eyes, and 7 years of running crashed into a truth that stopped his heart cold. He had left to protect her, but she had been carrying his son. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The dust rose in lazy spirals behind Cole Hawkins as his horse carried him into Bitter Creek for the first time in 7 years. The town had changed, grown from the scattered collection of buildings he remembered into something resembling civilization. New storefronts lined the main street. A church steeple pierced the endless Wyoming sky, and children played in the street without fear of the lawlessness that had once defined this territory. But some things remained the same. The mountains still loomed purple and eternal on the horizon, the wind still carried the scent of sage and pine, and the memories Cole had tried so hard to outrun still whispered in every shadow. He was 34 now, weathered by years of drifting from ranch to ranch, never staying long enough to put down roots, never allowing himself to grow attached to any place or person. The reasons for his wandering had grown hazy with time, buried beneath the practical necessities of survival, but deep in his chest, in a place he rarely allowed himself to examine, he knew exactly why he kept moving. He was running from a night he could never forget, and a woman whose face still haunted his dreams. Winona Red Hawk had been barely 20 when he first saw her, standing at the edge of the trading post with her long black braids catching the afternoon light. She was the daughter of a Lakota chief and a white trapper, belonging fully to neither world but carrying the beauty of both. Her eyes had held a fierce independence that had drawn Cole in like a moth to flame, and against every instinct that told him to keep his distance, he had found himself falling into something he had never expected to feel. Their time together had been brief and desperate, stolen moments during the worst year of his life. Cole had been on the run then, falsely accused of a murder he had witnessed but did not commit. The real killer, a wealthy rancher named Silas Garrett, had the sheriff and half the territory in his pocket, and Cole's only hope for survival had been to keep moving, to stay one step ahead of the men who wanted him dead. He should never have stopped in Bitter Creek. He should never have spoken to Winona. And he certainly should never have allowed himself to love her during those 3 weeks when the mountain passes were snowed in and escape was impossible. But he had loved her. God help him. He had loved her with an intensity that had terrified him. And when the snows finally melted and word came that Garrett's men were closing in, he had done the only thing he could think of to protect her. He had left without a word, without a goodbye, without any explanation that might put her in danger. He had ridden out of her life believing it was for her own good, believing that a wanted man had no right to offer a woman anything but trouble and heartbreak. For 7 years, he had carried the weight of that decision. For 7 years, he had wondered if she had cursed his name or wept for his absence. For 7 years, he had told himself that he had made the right choice, even as his heart called him a coward and a fool. Now, finally, the truth had come out. Silas Garrett had been exposed for the murderer he was, shot down by his own son in a dispute over land rights, and Cole's name had been cleared by a dying confession that had reached the territorial authorities. He was a free man for the first time in nearly a decade, and the first place his freedom had carried him was back to Bitter Creek, back to the woman he had never been able to forget. The saloon was quiet this early in the afternoon, and Cole tied his horse to the rail with hands that trembled slightly despite his efforts to control them. He had no idea if Winona was still here. She could have married, moved away, died in childbirth, or from one of the diseases that swept through frontier communities with terrible regularity. 7 years was a lifetime on the frontier, and a woman as beautiful and strong as Winona would have had no shortage of suitors once he had disappeared. The thought of her with another man sent a spike of jealousy through his chest that he had no right to feel. He had abandoned her. He had no claim on her future, no right to expect that she had waited for a ghost who never sent word or explanation. But still he had come, Driven by something deeper than logic, something that felt like destiny or doom were both tangled together in a knot he could not untie. He bought a whiskey at the bar and asked the bartender about the town, keeping his questions casual even as his heart pounded against his ribs. The older man was talkative, happy to fill in a stranger on the changes that had transformed Bitter Creek from a lawless outpost into a respectable community. A railroad spur was being built to connect them to the main line. A school had opened 2 years ago. The old trading post had been replaced by a proper general store run by a widow from back east. Cole listened without really hearing, waiting for the name he dreaded and longed for in equal measure. But it was not the bartender who spoke it. It was the sudden hush that fell over the room as the saloon doors swung open, and a woman stepped inside with the bearing of someone who had long since stopped caring what others thought of her presence in such an establishment. She was more beautiful than he remembered, and the sight of her stole the breath from his lungs. Her braids were longer now, reaching nearly to her waist, and her face had lost the softness of youth, replaced by the striking planes and angles of a woman who had survived hardship and emerged stronger for it. She wore the traditional beaded dress of her mother's people, the intricate patterns catching the light as she moved, and there was a fierceness in her dark eyes that spoke of battles fought and won in his absence. But it was not Winona alone who had silenced the room. It was the boy who stood beside her, gripping her hand with fingers that looked surprisingly familiar. He was perhaps 6 or 7 years old, with skin the color of honey, and eyes that were the exact shade of gray that Cole saw every time he looked in a mirror. The world seemed to narrow to a single point of focus as Cole stared at the boy. Everything else fell away, the murmur of the saloon, the curious stares of the other patrons, even the whiskey glass that slipped from his suddenly nerveless fingers and shattered on the wooden floor. The boy looked back at him with an expression of guarded curiosity, clearly sensing the intensity of the stranger's gaze but not understanding its source. Winona's eyes found Cole across the room, and he watched the color drain from her face as recognition dawned. For a long moment neither of them moved. 7 years of silence stretched between them like an uncrossable chasm, filled with all the words that had never been spoken, all the explanations that had never been given, all the pain that had accumulated in the absence of truth. Then Winona's expression hardened into something cold and dangerous. She turned away from him deliberately, crossing to the bar with the boy still clutching her hand, and spoke to the bartender in a voice loud enough for Cole to hear. She was asking about a shipment of supplies that should have arrived on the morning stage. Her tone was calm, businesslike, as if she had not just seen the ghost of her past standing 10 feet away with shock written across his weathered face. Cole found his voice, though it came out rough and broken. Winona. She did not turn. She completed her conversation with the bartender, collected a small package from behind the counter, and guided the boy toward the door with the kind of quiet dignity that made Cole's heart ache. He moved to intercept her, stepping into her path before he could think better of it. And finally, she was forced to look at him directly. Up close, he could see the changes that 7 years had wrought more clearly. There were faint lines around her eyes now, the marks of laughter and tears and endless Wyoming winds. Her hands, still beautiful, bore the calluses of hard work, and there was a wariness in her posture that suggested she had learned to expect disappointment from the world. But beneath it all, she was still Winona, still the woman who had captured his heart during those desperate, impossible weeks when he had been hiding from death and stumbling into love. "You need to move," she said, her voice flat and controlled. "Winona, please. I can explain." Her laugh was bitter, cutting through the quiet saloon like a blade. "Explain? You disappeared in the middle of the night without a word. You left me with nothing but questions and a broken heart. And now, 7 years later, you want to explain?" The boy was watching this exchange with wide, intelligent eyes, and Cole felt a fresh wave of shock as he recognized his own expressions playing across that young face. The stubborn set of the jaw, the slight furrow between the brows when concentrating, the way his head tilted slightly to one side when observing something new. It was like looking at a mirror that reflected the past, showing him the child he himself had once been. "Is he mine?" The words came out before Cole could stop them, barely more than a whisper. Winona's face went rigid with anger and pain. She pulled the boy closer to her side, positioning herself between him and Cole like a mother bear protecting her cub. "You have no right to ask that question. You lost that right when you vanished like a coward in the night. I was trying to protect you." Cole's voice cracked with desperation. "There were men hunting me, dangerous men. If they had found out about us, about you, they would have used you to get to me. I could not bear the thought of you being hurt because of my mistakes. So you hurt me instead." Winona's eyes blazed with the fire he remembered, the fierce independence that had drawn him to her in the first place. "You decided what was best for me without asking. You made choices about my life, about my future, without giving me any say in the matter. And then you left me to face the consequences alone." The weight of her words settled over Cole like a physical burden. He had spent 7 years convincing himself that his departure had been noble, that he had sacrificed his own happiness to keep her safe. But standing here now, seeing the pain and anger in her eyes, he understood for the first time how his choice must have felt from her perspective. He had not protected her. He had abandoned her. The boy tugged at Winona's hand, his gray eyes moving between his mother and this strange man who had turned their simple errand into something complicated and confusing. "Ma, who is this man? Why is he making you upset?" The question hung in the air, demanding an answer that Cole desperately wanted to hear. Winona looked down at her son, and for a moment her expression softened with a love so profound that it made Cole's chest ache. Then she looked back at him, and the coldness returned to her features. "Nobody important," she said, "just a stranger passing through." She moved past him, guiding the boy toward the door, and Cole let her go. What else could he do? He had no right to stop her, no claim on either of them, nothing to offer but explanations that came 7 years too late. The saloon doors swung closed behind them, and Cole stood alone in the sudden silence, surrounded by the curious stares of strangers who had just witnessed the reopening of old wounds. The bartender cleared his throat and set a fresh glass of whiskey on the bar. "On the house," he said gruffly. "Looks like you need it." Cole crossed to the bar on legs that felt unsteady beneath him. He picked up the glass but did not drink, staring instead at his own reflection in the mirror behind the bottles. The face that looked back at him was older than he remembered, marked by years of running and regret. But the eyes were the same gray as the boy's, and there was no denying what that meant. He had a son. Somewhere in this town, a child carried his blood and bore his features, and Cole had missed every moment of his life, every first step, every first word, every scraped knee and childhood nightmare. All of it had happened without him, because he had been too afraid to stay, too convinced that his absence was a gift rather than a curse. Cole spent the next 3 days learning everything he could about the woman he had left behind and the child he had never known existed. The townspeople were wary of his questions at first, protective of Winona in a way that spoke to the respect she had earned during his absence. But gradually, as he made it clear that he intended no harm, the stories began to emerge, each one adding another layer of guilt to the burden he already carried. Winona had nearly died giving birth to their son. The labor had lasted 2 days, and the doctor had been forced to make a choice between saving the mother or the child. Winona had demanded that he save the baby, had screamed the words through her agony until the doctor had promised to try to save them both. By some miracle, he had succeeded, but Winona had been bedridden for months afterward, too weak to care for the infant who had nearly killed her. The town had rallied around her in those dark days. The women had taken turns nursing the baby, cooking meals and sitting with Winona through the long nights when fever threatened to claim her life. The men had repaired her cabin, chopped her firewood, and ensured that she had everything she needed to survive the winter. Bitter Creek had embraced her as one of their own, and in return, Winona had become an integral part of the community. She worked as a seamstress now, her skilled fingers creating the intricate beadwork that fetched high prices from traders and tourists alike. She had built a small cabin on the edge of town, close enough to benefit from the community's protection, but far enough to maintain the independence that defined her spirit. And she had raised their son alone, teaching him to read and write, to ride and hunt, to honor both sides of his heritage even when the world tried to make him choose between them. The boy's name was Thomas, Cole learned, though Winona called him by his Lakota name, Matoska, which meant white bear. He was bright and curious, quick to learn and slow to anger, with a gentle heart that reminded Cole of his own mother. The townspeople spoke of him with genuine affection, describing a child who helped the elderly widow carry her groceries, who shared his lunch with the poorer children at school, who had once spent an entire afternoon trying to rescue a kitten stuck in a tree. Every story was another knife in Cole's chest. Every detail was another reminder of everything he had missed, everything he had thrown away when he rode out of Bitter Creek 7 years ago. He had told himself that he was protecting Winona, but the truth was more complicated and less flattering. He had been afraid, not just of the men hunting him, but of the feelings she stirred in his heart. He had been running from love as much as from danger, too damaged by his past to believe that he deserved the happiness she offered. On the 4th day, Cole gathered his courage and walked to Winona's cabin. The structure was small but well maintained, with a garden of herbs and vegetables growing beside the front porch and a chicken coop around the back. Smoke curled from the chimney, carrying the scent of cooking meat, and through the window, he could see Winona bent over her work, her fingers moving with practiced precision as she added beads to a piece of buckskin. He knocked on the door and waited, his heart pounding so loudly that he was certain she could hear it from inside. The sound of footsteps approached, and then the door opened and Winona stood before him with an expression that mixed weariness with resignation. "I knew you would come eventually," she said. "You might as well come in." The interior of the cabin was warm and surprisingly comfortable. Winona had transformed the simple space into a home, with colorful blankets hanging on the walls, dried flowers in jars on the windowsill, and books stacked on every available surface. Thomas was sitting at a small table in the corner working on what appeared to be schoolwork, and he looked up with undisguised curiosity as Cole entered. "Thomas," Winona said, her voice carefully neutral, "this is Cole Hawkins. He knew me a long time ago, before you were born." The boy studied Cole with those familiar gray eyes, and Cole felt the weight of judgment in that young gaze. Thomas was old enough to understand that there was history between his mother and this stranger, old enough to sense the tension that crackled in the air between them. But he was also young enough to reserve his conclusions, to wait and watch before making up his mind. "Hello," Thomas said politely. "Ma says we should always be respectful to visitors, even ones we did not invite." The subtle rebuke in those words made Cole's lips twitch despite himself. The boy had inherited his mother's sharp tongue along with his father's eyes. He was going to be a force to be reckoned with when he grew up, this child of two worlds, this son Cole had never known. "Your mother is right," Cole replied, crouching down to meet Thomas at eye level. "Respect is important. So is honesty." He glanced at Winona, then back at the boy. "I came here because I need to tell your mother something I should have told her a long time ago. Would you mind giving us a few minutes alone?" Thomas looked to his mother for guidance, and Winona hesitated before nodding. "Go check on the chickens," she said. "Make sure they have enough water." The boy gathered his schoolwork and headed for the back door, pausing to look back at Cole one more time before disappearing outside. The silence he left behind was heavy with expectation, and Cole realized that the next few minutes would determine whether he had any chance of redemption or whether his sins would follow him forever. Winona did not offer him a seat. She stood with her arms crossed over her chest, her back straight, and her chin lifted in that defiant posture he remembered so well. The years had taught her to armor herself against disappointment, and Cole understood that he was the one who had forged that armor blow by painful blow. "I do not expect forgiveness," he began, his voice rough with emotion. "I am not sure I deserve it, but I need you to understand why I left, even if it changes nothing between us." Winona's expression did not soften, but she did not tell him to leave either. She waited in silence, and Cole took a deep breath before continuing. 7 years ago, I was a wanted man. There was a rancher named Silas Garrett who had murdered a family for their land, and I had the misfortune of witnessing it. He framed me for the killing, used his money and influence to convince the authorities that I was the murderer. There was a bounty on my head, and men were hunting me across 3 territories. He paused, gathering his thoughts, trying to find the words that would convey the desperation of those days. When I came to Bitter Creek, I was just looking for somewhere to hide until the mountain passes cleared. I never expected to meet you. I never expected to fall in love. The word hung between them, dangerous and loaded with meaning. Winona's jaw tightened, but still she said nothing, waiting for him to finish. "Those 3 weeks we had together were the happiest of my life," Cole continued. "For the first time in months, I stopped running. I stopped looking over my shoulder. When I was with you, I could almost believe that I might have a future worth living for. But then word came that Garrett's men were close, that they had tracked me to the territory and were closing in." He ran a hand through his hair, the gesture betraying his agitation. "I knew what they would do if they found me with you. Garrett was ruthless. He had already killed an entire family to get what he wanted, including children. If he thought you meant something to me, he would have used you as leverage. He would have hurt you to get to me, or killed you just to send a message." "So you left," Winona said finally, her voice flat, "without a word, without giving me any choice in the matter. I thought I was protecting you." Cole's voice cracked. "I thought that if I disappeared completely, if there was no connection between us, you would be safe. I planned to come back once I had cleared my name, once the danger had passed. But the years kept stretching on, and Garrett kept evading justice, and I started to believe that I would never be free. And in all those years," Winona said, her voice rising with barely contained fury, "it never occurred to you to send word? To let me know that you were alive? To tell me that you had not simply used me and discarded me like a worn-out saddle?" The accusation struck him like a physical blow. "I was afraid," he admitted, "afraid that any contact might lead Garrett's men back to you, afraid that you had moved on, found someone better, built a life that did not include me. And yes, afraid that you would hate me for what I had done. I did hate you." Winona's voice was quiet now, but no less intense. "For years, I hated you with every breath in my body. I hated you when I realized I was carrying your child. I hated you when the labor nearly killed me. I hated you every time Thomas asked about his father, and I had to tell him that you were gone and might never come back." Tears were streaming down her face now, though her voice remained steady. "Do you know what that was like? Watching my son grow up without a father, knowing that somewhere out there the man who should have been raising him was living his life as if we did not exist." Cole felt his own eyes burning. "I thought about you every single day," he said. "Both of you, even though I did not know about Thomas. Every night when I closed my eyes, I saw your face. Every morning when I woke up, I wondered if you were safe, if you were happy, if you had found someone who could give you the life I could not." He took a step closer, and Winona did not move away. "Garrett is dead now. His own son shot him in a dispute over land, and before he died, he confessed to the murders. My name has been cleared. I am a free man for the first time in almost a decade. And so you came back. Winona's voice held a bitter edge. Now that it is convenient, now that it is safe, I came back because I never stopped loving you. The words came out fierce and desperate. I came back because every road I have traveled for 7 years has led me back to this place, to you. I came back because when I heard that I was finally free, the only thing I could think about was finding you and begging for a chance to make things right. The silence that followed was heavy with possibility. Winona stared at him, her dark eyes searching his face for any sign of deception. Cole stood before her judgment, knowing that he deserved whatever verdict she rendered, knowing that his entire future hung on what she said next. Through the window, he could see Thomas in the yard, scattering feed for the chickens with careful, deliberate movements. His son, the child he had never known, growing up strong and good despite his father's absence. The sight filled him with a longing so intense that it was almost physical pain. "You think you can just walk back into our lives," Winona said finally. "After everything, after all the years and all the pain, you think love is enough to fix what you broke." "I do not know," Cole admitted, "but I know that I have to try. I know that I cannot spend the rest of my life wondering what might have been if I had found the courage to stay." Winona turned away from him, moving to the window where she could watch her son without meeting Cole's eyes. The afternoon light caught the tears on her cheeks, making them glitter like tiny diamonds against her copper skin. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, though no less guarded. "You do not understand what you are asking. You want to be part of Thomas's life, but he does not know you. He has built his world without a father, learned to fill that empty space with other things. If you come into his life now and then leave again, it will destroy him. I am not leaving." Cole's voice was firm with conviction. "Not ever again. I have spent 7 years running, and I am done. Whatever it takes, however long it takes, I am going to prove to you and to Thomas that I am here to stay." Pretty words. Winona's tone was skeptical. Men are good at pretty words. They are less good at keeping the promises those words imply. "Then let me prove it with actions instead." Cole moved to stand beside her at the window, careful to maintain enough distance that she would not feel threatened. "I am not asking you to trust me overnight. I am not asking you to forgive me before I have earned that forgiveness. I am just asking for a chance." Outside, Thomas had finished feeding the chickens and was now sitting on an overturned bucket, whittling a piece of wood with a small knife. His concentration was complete, his young face serious as he worked, and Cole felt a swell of pride that had no right to exist. He had contributed nothing to this child's life, nothing except the gray eyes that marked Thomas as his son. Everything else, the kindness, the intelligence, the quiet determination that had come from Winona's patient teaching. "He is remarkable," Cole said quietly. "You have done an incredible job raising him. Do not." Winona's voice was sharp. "Do not try to compliment your way into my good graces. I raised him alone because you gave me no choice. I do not need your approval or your praise." The rebuke stung, but Cole accepted it. She was right to be angry, right to distrust his motives, right to protect her son from a man who had already proven himself capable of abandonment. He had no right to expect anything from her except the contempt he had earned. "What do you want from me?" Winona asked finally, her voice weary. "What exactly are you hoping will happen here?" Cole considered the question carefully. "I want to know my son. I want him to know me, not as a replacement for everything you have given him, but as an addition. I want to be part of his life, to teach him the things a father should teach, to be there for him as he grows into a man." He paused, gathering his courage for the harder admission. "And I want a chance to rebuild what we had, what I destroyed when I left. I know it will not be the same. I know that trust, once broken, is difficult to repair. But I have never stopped loving you, Winona, And I believe that somewhere beneath your anger and your pain, you still have feelings for me too." Winona was silent for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "You presume too much. Maybe. But I saw your face when you recognized me in the saloon. I saw the pain there, yes, but I also saw something else. Something that looked like hope before you buried it beneath your anger." She turned to face him, and the vulnerability in her expression made his heart ache. "You hurt me, Cole, more than I have ever been hurt by anyone. When you left, I thought I would die from the pain of it. The only thing that kept me going was the child growing inside me, the piece of you that I could not abandon no matter how much I wanted to." "I know." Cole's voice broke. "And I will spend the rest of my life trying to make amends for that pain." The back door opened, and Thomas entered with his whittling project clutched in his hand. He stopped short when he saw the two adults standing together at the window, clearly sensing the emotional weight of the moment he had interrupted. "Ma, is everything all right?" Winona wiped her eyes quickly, composing herself with the practiced ease of a woman who had learned to hide her tears from her son. "Everything is fine, sweetheart. Mr. Hawkins was just telling me about his travels." Thomas looked at Cole with renewed interest. "You are a traveler. Where have you been?" Cole knelt down to meet the boy at eye level, grateful for the chance to connect with his son even in this small way. "Just about everywhere," he said. "Montana, Colorado, Kansas, Texas. I have worked cattle drives, broken horses, and even spent a year panning for gold in California." "Did you find any gold?" Thomas's eyes were wide with fascination. "A little. Enough to buy supplies and keep moving." Cole smiled at the boy's enthusiasm. "But I learned that gold is not the most valuable thing a man can find in this world." "What is?" Thomas asked. Cole glanced at Winona, then back at his son. "Family," he said softly. "The people who love you and stand by you no matter what. That is worth more than all the gold in California." Thomas considered this with the seriousness that seemed characteristic of him. "My ma says the same thing. She says that love is the only treasure that matters. Your ma is a very wise woman." Cole rose to his feet, his knees protesting the movement after years of hard living. "You should listen to everything she tells you." The moment stretched between the three of them, fragile and full of possibility. Cole knew he was standing at a crossroads, and the path he took from here would determine everything. He could push too hard and drive Winona away forever. Or he could be patient, prove himself worthy of trust, and perhaps find the redemption he sought. "I should go," he said finally. "But I would like to come back tomorrow, if that would be all right. Maybe I could help with some chores around the place." Winona hesitated, clearly torn between her desire to protect her son and something else, something that looked almost like hope. The weeks that followed were the most challenging of Cole's life, more difficult in their way than all the years of running and hiding. Building trust was harder than he had imagined, requiring a patience he had not known he possessed, and a humility that did not come naturally to a man who had survived by relying on himself alone. He came to Winona's cabin every day, arriving early in the morning and staying until the evening chores were done. He repaired the fence that had been sagging for months, replaced the rotting boards on the chicken coop, and split enough firewood to last through the coming winter. He asked nothing in return, made no demands, and accepted Winona's continued coldness with a grace that surprised even himself. Thomas was easier to reach than his mother. The boy's natural curiosity overcame his initial wariness, and soon he was following Cole around the property, peppering him with questions about horses and cattle and the wild places he had seen in his travels. Cole answered every question honestly, careful never to glorify the violence and danger that had marked his years on the run, but not hiding the truth either. "Were you ever scared?" Thomas asked one afternoon as they worked together to repair a broken wagon wheel. When the bad men were chasing you? Cole considered the question seriously, respecting the boy enough to give him an honest answer. All the time, he admitted. Fear is not something to be ashamed of, Thomas. It is what keeps us alive when danger is near. The important thing is not to let fear control you, not to let it stop you from doing what needs to be done. Thomas nodded solemnly, absorbing this wisdom with the seriousness that characterized everything he did. Ma says that courage is not the absence of fear. It is doing what is right even when you are afraid. Your mother is a very smart woman. Cole tightened the last bolt on the wheel and stepped back to examine his work. I should have listened to her more when I had the chance. The boy's gray eyes studied Cole's face with an intensity that was almost unsettling. You loved her, did you not? My ma. That is why you came back. Cole felt his throat tighten. Yes, he said simply. I loved her very much. I still do. Then why did you leave? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with the weight of all the pain and confusion that Thomas had carried throughout his young life. Cole knew that this moment was crucial, that his answer would shape his son's understanding of love and loyalty and the complicated choices that adults sometimes had to make. I made a mistake, Cole said finally. I thought I was protecting her by leaving, but I was wrong. Sometimes when we are afraid, we make choices that seem right at the time but turn out to be terribly wrong. I have regretted that choice every day since I made it. Thomas was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. Then he asked the question that Cole had been dreading. Are you my father? The world seemed to stop. Cole looked at his son, at the gray eyes that were so like his own, at the stubborn set of the jaw that he recognized from his own mirror, and he knew that there was only one answer he could give. Yes, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I am. I thought so. Thomas's voice was surprisingly calm. I figured it out from the way Ma looks at you. She only gets that angry at people who matter to her. Cole felt tears prick at his eyes. You are not upset? Thomas shrugged with the philosophical acceptance that children sometimes possess. I always knew my father was out there somewhere. Ma never told me you were dead, just that you had to go away. I used to imagine what you might be like, what you might be doing. He paused, his young face thoughtful. You are different from what I imagined, but I think maybe you are better too. The simple acceptance in his son's words broke something loose in Cole's chest. He pulled Thomas into an embrace, holding him tightly as tears streamed down his weathered face. The boy stiffened initially, unused to such displays of affection from men, but then his small arms came up to return the embrace with surprising strength. They stayed like that for a long moment, father and son, bridging 7 years of absence with a single gesture of love. When they finally pulled apart, Thomas was smiling, and Cole felt something that he had not experienced in longer than he could remember. Hope. I am glad you came back, Thomas said. Ma is too, even if she will not say it yet. How do you know? Because she sings now when she does her beadwork. She stopped singing for a long time, but she started again a few days after you arrived. The revelation warmed Cole's heart. He knew better than to read too much into such a small sign, but it was something. A crack in the armor that Winona had built around her heart. A possibility that forgiveness might still be within reach. That evening, when Cole went to take his leave, Winona stopped him at the door. Her expression was still guarded, but there was something softer in her eyes than there had been before. Thomas told me about your conversation. She paused, choosing her words carefully. He seems happy. Happier than I have seen him in a long time. He is a remarkable boy, Cole replied. You should be proud of him. I am. Winona's voice carried a fierce maternal pride. He is the best thing I have ever done. Winona, Cole began. but she held up a hand to stop him. Do not say anything that you cannot take back. I am not ready to hear it yet." She took a breath, steadying herself. "But you may come back tomorrow. Thomas would like that." It was not forgiveness, not yet. But it was a step forward, and Cole would take whatever steps she was willing to offer. The trouble arrived on a gray October morning, riding into Bitter Creek on horses lathered with sweat and exhaustion. 3 men, hard-faced and travel-worn, with the look of men who had ridden far and fast in pursuit of something they wanted badly. Cole recognized the type immediately: the cold eyes, the casual way they wore their guns, the arrogance that came from years of doing violence for pay. He was in the general store when they entered, buying supplies for a fence repair he had promised to complete at Winona's cabin. The men spread out across the store with the practiced efficiency of professionals, one blocking the door while the other 2 approached the counter where the proprietor stood frozen with fear. "Looking for a man," the leader said, his voice carrying the flat accent of the Southern Territories. "Name of Cole Hawkins. Heard he might be in this area." Cole felt his blood run cold. Garrett was dead. His name had been cleared, but apparently not everyone had received that information. Or perhaps these men did not care about legal technicalities. Perhaps they had been paid in advance and intended to collect their bounty regardless of what the law now said. "Never heard of him," the shopkeeper replied, his voice trembling slightly. "We do not get many strangers through here." "That's so?" The leader's smile did not reach his eyes. "Funny, because we heard different. Heard there was a drifter fitting his description who showed up here a few weeks back. Tall, gray eyes, rides a buckskin mare with a white blaze." Cole kept his back turned, his hand moving slowly toward the gun at his hip. He had survived 7 years by trusting his instincts, and every instinct he possessed was screaming that these men meant to kill him regardless of what they learned. "Lot of drifters come through," the shopkeeper said, showing more courage than Cole would have expected. "Cannot keep track of all of them." The leader's patience snapped. He grabbed the shopkeeper by the collar and hauled him halfway across the counter. "Listen here, old man. We have been riding for 3 weeks to find this bastard. Someone in this town knows where he is, and we are going to keep asking until we get answers. You understand?" Cole made his decision in that instant. He could not let innocent people suffer for his sake, could not let the violence that had followed him for 7 years spill over onto the community that had welcomed him back. He turned slowly, his hand still near his gun, but not yet drawing, and faced the men who had come to kill him. "You are looking for me," he said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through his veins. "Let the shopkeeper go." The leader released his grip, a predatory smile spreading across his face. Well, Cole Hawkins in the flesh. "You know how long we have been hunting you? Long enough that you should have heard the news." Cole kept his voice calm, buying time while he assessed his options. "Silas Garrett is dead. He confessed to the murders before he died. My name has been cleared. We know." The leader's smile turned cruel. "But Garrett's widow is not interested in justice. She is interested in revenge. Paid us triple our usual rate to make sure you never enjoy your freedom." The words hit Cole like a punch to the gut. He had thought he was finally free, finally safe to build the life he had dreamed of. But the past had followed him anyway, reaching out with bloody hands to drag him back into the darkness. "Walk away," Cole said, his voice hardening. "I do not want to kill anyone, but I will if you force my hand. 3 against 1. The leader shook his head with mock sympathy. "Those are not good odds, Hawkins. I have survived worse." The tension in the store was suffocating. Cole could see the other 2 men positioning themselves for crossfire, spreading out to make it impossible for him to cover all 3 at once. He was going to die here, in this dusty general store, just when he had finally found something worth living for. Then a voice rang out from the doorway, clear and commanding. Actually, the odds are 3 against 2. Cole's heart lurched as he recognized Winona's voice. She stood in the doorway with a rifle raised to her shoulder, the barrel trained on the man blocking the exit. Her face was set in the fierce expression he remembered from their first meeting, the look of a woman who would not be intimidated by anyone. "Winona, no." Cole's voice was desperate. "Get out of here. I am not going anywhere." Her eyes never left her target. These men threatened my town and the father of my child. They should have expected resistance. The leader's expression shifted, uncertainty replacing confidence as he recalculated the odds. "Well now," he said slowly. "This changes things." "It does." Winona's voice was cold as winter wind. "You have 2 choices. You can ride out of here and tell Garrett's widow that Cole Hawkins is under the protection of Bitter Creek. Or you can die in this store and be buried in unmarked graves on the prairie." The moment stretched, taut as a bowstring. Cole watched the leader's eyes, saw the calculation happening behind them as he weighed his options. 3 professional killers against a drifter, and a woman with a rifle. The odds still favored the hunters, but not by as much as they had a moment ago, and not enough to guarantee survival. "Garrett's money is not worth dying for," the leader said finally, his hands moving slowly away from his guns. "We will go." "But this is not over, Hawkins. The widow has deep pockets and a long memory. Then she should use that memory to remember her husband's sins." Cole kept his hand on his gun until all 3 men had backed out of the store. "Because I am done running. Anyone else who comes for me will find the same reception." The bounty hunters rode out of Bitter Creek within the hour, but the fear they had brought with them lingered like smoke after a fire. Cole stood on the porch of the general store, watching until they disappeared over the horizon, his hand never straying far from his gun. Only when the last rider had vanished did he allow himself to breathe again. Winona lowered her rifle and turned to face him. Her hands were trembling slightly, the only sign of the fear she had hidden behind her fierce facade. Cole crossed to her in 3 quick strides and pulled her into his arms without thinking, holding her against his chest as the tension of the confrontation finally released. "You should not have done that," he said into her hair. "You could have been killed. So could you." Her voice was muffled against his chest, but he could hear the emotion in it. "And I was not going to stand by and watch it happen, not again, not after everything. Not." They held each other for a long moment, oblivious to the townspeople who had emerged from their hiding places to witness the aftermath of the confrontation. When they finally pulled apart, there were tears in Winona's eyes, but also something else, something that looked like the walls around her heart finally beginning to crumble. "I thought I had lost you once," she said quietly. "I survived it, but barely. I do not think I could survive it again." Cole cupped her face in his hands, wiping away her tears with his thumbs. "You will not have to. I am not going anywhere, Winona. Whatever comes, we face it together." The words hung between them, a promise more binding than any contract, more sacred than any vow spoken in a church. Winona searched his eyes for any sign of deception, any hint that he might be saying what she wanted to hear, rather than what he truly meant. Whatever she found there must have satisfied her, because she rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his in a kiss that tasted of tears and forgiveness, and 7 years of longing finally released. The townspeople erupted in cheers and applause, breaking the spell of the moment. Cole and Winona pulled apart, both flushing with embarrassment at having provided such a public display. But neither could bring themselves to regret it. Some moments were too important to hide, too precious to be diminished by concern for propriety. Word of the confrontation spread through Bitter Creek like wildfire. By evening, every household knew how Winona Redhawk had faced down 3 killers to protect the man who had fathered her child. Opinions were divided, some praising her courage while others clucked their tongues at such unladylike behavior. But no one could deny that she had proven herself a woman of extraordinary strength and loyalty. Thomas was waiting for them when they returned to the cabin, his young face pale with worry. Sarah Mitchell from the neighboring farm had kept him occupied during the confrontation, but children had ways of knowing when something important was happening. He ran to his mother the moment she appeared, wrapping his arms around her waist and holding on as if he feared she might disappear. "Ma, are you all right? What happened?" People were saying there were bad men in town. Winona knelt down to meet her son's eyes. "Everything is fine, sweetheart. The bad men are gone, and they will not be coming back." Thomas looked past his mother to Cole, who stood in the doorway with an expression of profound gratitude and love. "Did you fight them? Did you protect Ma?" "Your mother protected me," Cole replied honestly. "She is the bravest woman I have ever known." Thomas considered this information with his characteristic seriousness. Then he crossed to Cole and took his hand, the gesture simple but profound. "I am glad you are both safe. I do not want to lose either of you." The words struck Cole with unexpected force. For 7 years he had been alone, accountable to no one, responsible for nothing but his own survival. Now he had a son who depended on him, a woman who had risked her life for him, a community that had rallied around him despite his troubled past. The weight of that responsibility should have felt crushing. Instead, it felt like freedom. That night, after Thomas had been put to bed, Cole and Winona sat together on the cabin's small porch, watching the stars emerge one by one in the vast Wyoming sky. The silence between them was comfortable now, free of the tension and mistrust that had marked their earlier interactions. "Those men will tell others," Winona said finally. "More may come." "I know." Cole reached for her hand, intertwining his fingers with hers. "But we will be ready, and we will not face them alone." "You sound very confident I have something worth fighting for now." Cole turned to look at her, his gray eyes reflecting the starlight. "You and Thomas, this place, this life we are building together. I will not let anyone take that away from us." Winona was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice soft but certain. "When you left 7 years ago, I thought my heart would never heal. I thought I would spend the rest of my life hating you for what you had done. And now I understand why you did it. I do not agree with your choice, and I'm not sure I can ever fully forgive the pain it caused. But I understand that you thought you were protecting me." She squeezed his hand. "And today you proved that you are willing to die for us. That has to count for something. It is not enough." Cole's voice was rough with emotion. "Nothing I do will ever be enough to make up for the years I lost with Thomas, the years you spent alone." "No," she agreed. "It will not. But it is a start." They sat together in silence as the night deepened around them, two people who had been broken by circumstance and separation, slowly learning how to be whole again. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be more challenges, more dangers, more moments when the past threatened to destroy the future they were building. But for the first time in 7 years, Cole felt hope blooming in his chest like a flower pushing through frozen ground. The winter came early that year, sweeping down from the mountains with a ferocity that trapped Bitter Creek beneath blankets of snow for weeks at a time. The passes closed before Thanksgiving, cutting the town off from the outside world and creating a strange, isolated peace that Cole had never experienced before. For the first time in 7 years, he was not running, not looking over his shoulder, not sleeping with one hand on his gun. He was simply living, and the novelty of it was almost overwhelming. He had moved into a small cabin at the edge of town, close enough to Winona's property to be helpful, but far enough to maintain the propriety that the community expected. Every morning he walked through the snow to her door, and every evening he returned to his own bed, though the separation grew more difficult with each passing day. The kiss they had shared after the confrontation had opened something between them, a door that neither was willing to close, but both were hesitant to walk through completely. Thomas flourished under his father's attention. Cole taught him to track deer through fresh snow, to read the weather in the shape of clouds, to care for horses with the patience and gentleness that the animals required. The boy absorbed everything with eager enthusiasm, his questions endless, and his curiosity boundless. Each day brought new discoveries, new skills, new moments of connection that helped bridge the 7 years of absence. One evening, as a blizzard howled outside and the three of them huddled around Winona's fireplace, Thomas asked the question that Cole had been dreading and hoping for in equal measure. "Are you going to marry Ma?" The words fell into the warm silence of the cabin like stones into still water. Winona's hands stilled on her beadwork, and Cole felt heat rise to his face despite the cold wind rattling the windows. He looked at Winona, seeking guidance, but her expression gave nothing away. "That is not a decision I can make alone," Cole said carefully. "Marriage requires two people who want to spend their lives together. Your mother would have to agree." Thomas turned to Winona with the directness that only children possess. "Do you want to marry him, Ma?" Winona set aside her beadwork and looked at her son with an expression of profound love. "What do you want, Thomas? This affects you as much as it affects me." The boy considered the question with the seriousness he brought to everything. "I want us to be a family," he said finally. "A real family like the other children have. I want Cole to live here with us instead of in that cold cabin by himself. I want to call him Pa instead of Cole." The simple honesty of the request brought tears to Winona's eyes. She looked at Cole across the firelit room, and he saw the last of her resistance crumbling away. 7 years of anger and pain and loneliness, finally releasing their grip on her heart. "Thomas," Cole said, his voice rough with emotion, "would you give your mother and me a moment alone?" The boy nodded and retreated to his small bedroom, though Cole suspected he would be listening at the door. Children always did. He crossed to where Winona sat and knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "I have nothing to offer you except myself," he said. "No fortune, no fine house, no guarantee that the past will not catch up with us again. But I love you, Winona. I have loved you since the moment I first saw you standing at the trading post with the sun in your hair, and I will spend every day of the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you and Thomas." Winona reached out and touched his face, her fingers tracing the lines that 7 years of hardship had carved into his features. "You have already proven yourself worthy," she said softly. "Not with grand gestures or pretty words, but with patience and persistence, and the simple daily acts of a man who loves his family. Is that a yes?" She smiled, and the expression transformed her face, erasing years of pain and revealing the young woman he had fallen in love with so long ago. "Yes, Cole Hawkins, I will marry you." He pulled her into his arms and kissed her with all the passion and longing that had been building since his return. She responded with equal fervor, her arms wrapping around his neck as if she never intended to let him go. The years of separation melted away, and there was only this moment, this promise, this second chance at the happiness they had both thought was lost forever. The bedroom door creaked open, and Thomas emerged with a grin spreading across his young face. "Does this mean I can call you Pa now?" Cole opened his arms, and the boy ran into them, completing the circle of their small family. "You can call me whatever you want," Cole said, his voice thick with emotion. "As long as you know that I love you and your mother more than anything in this world." They held each other as the blizzard raged outside, 3 people who had been scattered by fate and reunited by love. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the walls, and outside the window the snow fell in endless white curtains, covering the earth in a blanket of purity and new beginnings. The wedding would wait until spring, when the passes opened and the circuit preacher could make his way to Bitter Creek. But in their hearts, they were already married, bound together by something stronger than legal documents or religious ceremonies. They were a family, forged in the crucible of separation and loss, tempered by the fires of danger and uncertainty, and finally united in the warmth of forgiveness and love. That night, as Cole prepared to leave for his own cabin, Winona stopped him at the door. "Stay," she said simply. "The storm is too fierce for you to walk home." It was not just about the storm, and they both knew it. Cole looked at Thomas, who had fallen asleep on the rug by the fire, and then at Winona, whose eyes held an invitation that required no words. He closed the door against the howling wind and stayed. Spring arrived in Bitter Creek with an explosion of color and life that seemed to mirror the transformation in Cole's own heart. The snow retreated up the mountain slopes, revealing meadows carpeted with wildflowers, and the creek that gave the town its name ran red with iron-rich sediment from the thawing peaks. It was a season of renewal, of new beginnings, and nowhere was that more evident than in the small cabin where Cole Hawkins had finally found his home. The wedding took place on a warm April morning, with the entire town gathered to witness the union that everyone had seen coming since the day Winona faced down 3 killers with nothing but a rifle and her fierce love. Reverend Parker performed the ceremony beneath a canopy of apple blossoms, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd as he spoke the words that would bind Cole and Winona together for the rest of their lives. Thomas stood beside his father as best man, his young face solemn with the importance of the occasion. He had grown several inches over the winter, shooting up with the sudden speed of boys approaching adolescence, and Cole could see glimpses of the man he would become in the set of his jaw and the steadiness of his gray eyes. Their eyes, father and son, identical in color and expression, a visible testament to the bond that connected them across the years of separation. When the moment came to exchange vows, Cole found that the words he had prepared deserted him completely. He stood before Winona in his best clothes, looking into the dark eyes that had haunted his dreams for 7 years, and spoke from his heart instead. "I cannot promise you an easy life," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I cannot promise that the past will never find us or that danger will never touch our door again. But I can promise you this: I will stand beside you through whatever comes. I will love you and Thomas with every breath in my body, and I will never, ever leave you again." Winona's answering vow was equally simple. "You saved me once, Cowboy," she said, echoing words she had spoken to him long ago. "But you left something behind that night, a piece of your heart that grew into our son. Now I am giving you a chance to reclaim what you lost. Do not waste it." The kiss that sealed their union drew cheers from the assembled townspeople, and Thomas threw his arms around both his parents in an embrace that nearly knocked all 3 of them off their feet. The years of loneliness and longing, the pain of separation and the uncertainty of reunion, all of it fell away in that moment of perfect joy. The celebration continued long into the evening, with food and music and dancing that lasted until the stars emerged overhead. Cole danced with his wife beneath the lantern light, holding her close and marveling at the strange path that had led him back to her arms. He had spent 7 years running from his past, convinced that he could never have the things that other men took for granted. Now he had all of it and more: a wife who loved him, a son who called him Pa, a community that had accepted him despite his troubled history. As the party wound down and the guests began to drift away, Cole found himself standing alone at the edge of the celebration, watching his family with a sense of wonder that had not faded since his return. Winona was laughing at something Thomas had said, her face radiant in the flickering light, and the boy was grinning with the carefree joy of a child who finally had everything he had ever wanted. A hand clapped Cole on the shoulder, and he turned to find Sheriff Warren standing beside him. The lawman had been instrumental in spreading word of Cole's exoneration, ensuring that no more bounty hunters would come seeking a price on his head. "You are a lucky man, Hawkins," the sheriff said. "Not many get a second chance like this." "I know." Cole's voice was quiet but fervent. "I do not intend to waste it. See that you do not." The sheriff's eyes were serious despite his friendly tone. "This town has taken you in, and that woman has forgiven you for sins that would have broken most people. You owe it to all of them to be the man they believe you can be." The words stayed with Cole long after the sheriff had departed. He thought about them as he carried a sleeping Thomas to bed, as he closed the door on their wedding celebration, as he took Winona's hand and led her into the home they would share for the rest of their lives. He had been given a gift beyond measure, and he was determined to spend every day earning it. The years that followed were not without challenges. The frontier was an unforgiving place, and there were hard winters and lean summers, sickness and loss, and the constant struggle to carve a life from the unforgiving land. But through it all, Cole and Winona stood together, their love deepening with each passing season, their family growing as two more children joined Thomas in the small cabin that seemed to expand to accommodate each new blessing. Thomas grew into the man that Cole had glimpsed on his wedding day, strong and steady and wise beyond his years. He married a schoolteacher from back east and built a cabin of his own on the land his father had worked, continuing the legacy that Cole had almost thrown away so many years before. And when Cole's grandchildren asked about the scar on his shoulder, the one he had earned facing down the bounty hunters who had come for him, he would gather them close and tell them the story of how their grandmother had saved his life with nothing but a rifle and a love that refused to surrender. On warm summer evenings, Cole and Winona would sit on their porch and watch the sun set behind the mountains, their hands intertwined as they had been for decades. The past no longer haunted them. The future no longer frightened them. They had found what so many people spend their entire lives seeking, a love that had survived separation and danger and emerged stronger than ever. "You saved me once, Cowboy," Winona would whisper as the stars emerged overhead. And Cole would kiss her weathered cheek and reply, "No, we saved each other."